Right, so let's get a show on the road then. The PS2 sold loads of units, defined a generation or something like that, and yeah, let's just get started. Okay, I guess we've got to do this properly then. When you think of gaming, and by you I mean an elderly relative, their mind usually goes to naming one of three things. Game Boy, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon for the N64, because I forgot to say this elderly relative is based, and
PlayStation.
specifically the successor that kind of broke all console records and has set the bar for every subsequent console, I guess. While not the first console that I owned or played, it is definitely the one that I have the best memories of. To this day, I still bring up my time playing Scooby-Doo, Mystery Mayhem, and the game froze, so I went over to the wall, I turned the PS2 off at the wall, and the wall plug fuse just blew up in a sooty mini explosion. My hands were just covered in just black dirt, and I bring that up fondly. This video isn't about the core memories that may explain why I am the way I am mentally. No, it's about something much more interesting. From the moment you boot up the PS2, two things are established. Number one, the PS2 safe file towers will outlive you, your children, and their children. And two, this is the big jump, an actual next generation. Graphics may have gotten much better since, but the evolution has never been as drastic as it was here. We get that visually from the aforementioned safe file towers, and we hear it audibly, the intro blaring before seamlessly transitioning into a low humming pool of ambient music, noise being a permanent fixture but non-obtrusive, the occasional wave shaking up the permanent calmness of it all. It's the kind of music that I just can't imagine being possible on a previous generation, and to this day, I still prefer booting up my PS2 without a disc in it so I can hear that theme. It might sound silly, but it's just how I do it. And there are plenty of smart people out there who are capable of breaking down video game music down to the minutiae and just explaining why it is so incredible. Not me. I'm here to pinpoint the games and their music that has stood the test of time and played a significant role in establishing a chokehold on music lovers like myself. Some of the music that we'll talk about today did something particularly special, but everything that I mentioned in this video helps do one huge thing. It helps to define the PS2. And what better way to start that discussion than with the series that objectively made the PS2 what it was. Okay, the second series that objectively made the PS2 what it was. Sure, nowadays we're all well aware of what a behemoth Grand Theft Auto is, a franchise with a fifth entry so popular that in the time since it was released, I've graduated from high school, college, university, got engaged, memorised how to wear clothes in front of a camera, and still it is relevant. Back in the 90s though, the wheels were just starting to get into motion, and while San Andreas was the most popular entry and Free the first to do 3D GTA, the game I want to bring up is nowadays we're well used to and admittedly tired of the 80s nostalgia train, but in 2002 people could not get enough of Vice City, striking a neon chord with gamers so much that it became one of only 4 PS2 games to sell over 10 million units. And as we all know, popularity equals quality. I mean, are you really going to argue with me about Kinect Adventures being the 39th best game of all time? Didn't think so. Out of all 3 mainline entries available on the PS2, I think it's hard to argue Vice City isn't the most aesthetically pleasing of the lot. From the flashy bright colours right down to the minute details, Vice City lives, dies, and involuntary manslaughters by its 80s style. And if there's one thing I'm willing to bet everyone remembers about this game, it's the music. It may be an assortment of music from the time, but considering just how packed the early to mid 80s was with good music, the curation Rockstar conducted was no easy task. As with nearly all entries in this series, music is listened to via radio stations that you can tune into via any vehicle that you've legally acquired, and for my money, when it comes to Vice City, GTA is yet to produce a finer selection of stations. Prime amongst them, Flash FM, Out of Touch, Dancehall Days, Billie Jean, Video Killed the Radio Star, Life's What You Make It, Stepping Out, Four Little Diamonds, Owner of a Lonely Heart, all of these gems that any one game would be lucky to have to work with, and we get it on one station. That's without mentioning Emotion 98.3, Wave 103, V-Rock, or any of the other stations that guarantee you're never going to cut up short when putting on the radio while doing the things that all GTA players do, like looking both ways before you cross the road and obeying all the traffic laws. And then there's the brilliant original score, which only adds to this immersion that rolling 808 cowbell alone is enough to make a Hawaiian shirt appear on your chest. Sure, Vice City may be pigeonholed to a certain point in time, but of the calibre of music I just mentioned, and a sardonic sting like this.
This is Tony and you're on Flash, where we play nothing but the best pop music all day, every day until the end of time, which could be tomorrow, so live like it's forever tonight.
Vice City hasn't aged a bit. Well, okay it has, but music wise, it's a fine wine. Sippy sip sip. So I originally planned on covering the next 3 games at random throughout this video, but considering that they feel like a bit of a package deal, I thought why not deliver them as such. So here we have the Artsy Fartsy trilogy, and I mean that in a totally endearing way. And why not start with a titan, a giant, is that it? There really wasn't and still isn't anything quite like Shadow of the Colossus. It's a before trilogy of games, and that every nerd who hypes it up is absolutely on the money, and the argument could even be made that it's still a bit underrated, but I digress. Without rambling about the influence, impact and just general greatness of this title, let me give you the gist. Shadow of the Colossus has players take on the role of Wanderer who, in order to revive the assumed love interest Mono, must kill the 16 colossi scattered across the land. Could do it in an afternoon, to be honest with you, but anyway, think of all the great entrance themes for kaiju out there. Your Godzillas, your King Kongs, your Nutty Professors, the visuals and the money put into them only help so much. For me, it's the music that accompanies them that really does help them to stick out in your mind, and composer Kawatani knew exactly that. He was more than aware of that. Having worked on the Gamera film scores in the 90s, getting Atani on board to create a dynamic and gallant soundtrack was a no-brainer, but who could have foreseen just how above and beyond the Call of Duty he went to deliver on that promise. Battles in Shadow of the Colossus are not simple endeavours by any stretch of the imagination, and while Kawatani could have just simply went for a very basic looping score, that's not what happened at all. Take Avion for example, who, true to his Spanish name, is a flying colossus who you see glide in and perch on some crumbling ruins. Again, the game could have theoretically jumped into a repetitive barrage of strings and other orchestra equipment I definitely know the name of, but what we get is so much more satisfying than that. As I make my way across, it's more of a melancholic affair, but there's probably nothing nefarious about that. After all, I have to kill this beautiful creature, right? Once I finish treading through the water and manage to climb aboard Avian, the tone shifts. It's no longer a timid affair. No, things are kicked up a few notches, the strings becoming all the more suspenseful, though buried underneath all the flapping, cacophonous sound effects. Yet the score, much like myself, digs its fingernails deep in, holding on for dear life. No time to think about the symphony though, I'm dangling off Avia and it's time to finish what I started. After successfully reaching his weak spot, sword and clumps of his fur in hand, I plunge my weapon inside, and as I successfully deliver the killing blow, the mood changes yet again. Somber choir vocals join the fray as Avian crashes into the water below. Did I do the right thing? This is more a funeral march than a victory march, and now I'm puking? What's going on? And that, my friends, is just one of 16 epic themes that Shadow of the Colossus has at its disposal. Chills. Actual chills. As amazing as all of this is, it's the moments where the soundtrack is absent that helps to make it all the more special. When exploring the vast forbidden land, a domain all but void of life, players won't hear so much as a whisper of a noise. The most they'll hear is like ambient noises of nearby streams of water and wind. Not only is this a case of absence making the heart and ears grow fonder, but it's also hugely symbolic. The only time the lively soundtrack appears is when you're facing the colossi you're unnecessarily slaughtering, the silence in between fights only becoming more deafening as the body count rises. It's a sprawling, hulking beauty of a soundtrack, and just an incredible effort for Studio's debut title. What's that? It's not their debut. Then what did Team Ico make before this? You're joking. With such a huge leap in processing power from the PS1 to the PS2, it was no surprise that developers wanted to make the most of it. Make their racing games look flashier, make worlds that require zero loading screens, make beloved platforming icons bad? To be honest, not really sure they should have done that last one. It's not hard to argue that as a game, Ico is revolutionary, a story-focused title whose gameplay and scope would have put a console from the prior generation through its paces to try and run. However, when it comes to the soundtrack, Ico follows a less is more ethos, and boy oh boy does it benefit tremendously from that. Its gargantuan spiritual sequel may be more ambitious, but to imply that what came before it is automatically not as good would be naive. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that Ico's soundtrack is on par with Shadow of the Colossus. Sure, it's apples and oranges. Colossus has that sprawling score to hype up epic battles, while Ico decides to shackle itself to a limited palette. Similarly to Colossus, there'll be lengthy moments where no music plays, but unlike that game where that music serves to enforce the energy and life of the titular creatures, Ico's is more curious, sometimes even sinister, which is fitting for a game revolving around escape and mystery. By sticking to a restricted playset, Michiru Oshima and co worked within their means and managed to produce one of the most beautiful, sparse soundtracks I've ever heard. You might think we'd be short of highlights to discuss considering the official soundtrack releases barely over 20 minutes, but you'd be wrong. There is one song I want to draw particular focus to, the magnum opus of Ico's music, and comfortably in my top 5 video game songs ever, Heal. I'm not going to go on a whole diatribe about it, just take the 100 seconds required to listen to it and your ears will be blessed with the most serene sounds I've ever encountered. Ico's not a particularly difficult game, but if by saving my progress I get to hear this song every time, I'll happily invest in a dozen odd memory cards to do so. I also want to give props to Oshima for making the most fleshed out song, You Were There, the finale. It's a reward alone just to play Ico, but having that song to see things out is also a satisfying bonus. Like the game itself, Ico's soundtrack helped lay the groundwork for the music that we would experience for generations to come, like the Soul series and Breath of the Wild. It was the instigator of minimal but impactful soundtracks. How could that not be definitive? We could talk all day about games and how they age. Should they be designed with that mortality in mind? What gameplay is the most timeless? And then there's a whole ethical conundrum about emulating games that are old enough that you have to pay an arm and a leg for them on eBay. And I say ethical conundrum because you definitely should not download the relevant emulator and the ROM of the game that you want to play. Please do not do that, especially if you're wanting to play PS2 games. Do not download PCXS2. And again, I'm just telling you that so that you don't, accidentally download that emulator and then download the ROM of the inaccessible PS2 game that you want to play. Just do not do that. I'm looking out for you. But when it comes to the positive side of this discussion and choosing what games have aged the best, there's a certain PS2 title that audibly and visually feels like it could have came out yesterday. Usually games receive ports or remasters just to make more money, but I think that's too simple and too cynical when it comes to Okami, a PS2 title that's found a home on 5 other consoles. And yeah, I'm sure Capcom just wanted to make more money. I'm sure that was definitely on their mind when they did this, but I also think it was to give this game a much deserved second chance. One of the final games to release on the PS2 prior to the PS3's launch, it's not hard to see why Okami didn't break sales records, but it's undeniable that it deserved a kinder response. It turned 16 years old in 2022, and sure, you can tell it's an older game if you watch gameplay, but its Shinto watercolour aesthetic is in the same league as Wind Waker's cel-shaded one. Unlike most games from this era, I'd be more than happy to play its original release over any HD ports. That Zelda comparison isn't single layered either. Okami is indebted to Nintendo's flagship series by virtue of being a 3D adventure title, but when it comes to its soundtrack, Clover Studios' penultimate title is every bit as good as its influence. Earlier on I mentioned Shinto, an indigenous faith that originates from Japan, when talking about how the game looks, but this has just as much of an impact on how it sounds as well. Okami incorporates authentic Japanese instruments such as the wagon and fue to create some rich, mostly relaxing numbers that give the game, especially its exploration moments, a serene mood that further immerses you in the watercolour portrait world. Okami's soundtrack isn't flat either, as a track like Fighting Waka used during combat segments utilises the Tizumi to give it a beefier, tense texture that enhances every altercation. And after saying all of that, honestly I've not finished Okami. I've actually got a copy of it right here. I picked it up in the mid 2010s as part of my PS2 renaissance where I was playing it loads. Never finished it, played a few hours of it, tremendously enjoyed it, but just never got around to it. The same thing happened with Psychonauts. I played a bit of that, just dropped it afterwards. I only recently completed it and its sequel, and those two would be amongst my favourite games ever made, so maybe the same fate awaits Okami. All that aside though, the fact that a game that I've barely played has stuck with me all these years based solely on the soundtrack alone makes vouching for Okami's cult status a very easy feat. So how do I connect this to my PS2? Another series that has contributed to the success of the PS2 just as much as it has the impact of landfills in our environment. The role Guitar Hero's music played in defining this generation may seem a bit shallow, unlike GTA where creation helped out with a specific decade's generation aesthetic. Surely Guitar Hero is more of a glorified playlist than a worthy nominee for this video. No. Oh, you want me to elaborate on that? Both talking about the 6th generation of gaming and not bringing up Guitar Hero is kind of like bringing up Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers and you don't have a random man going to you, hey, you know when Aragorn kicks that helmet, he actually... It really cannot be understated how much of a phenomenon Guitar Hero and its equally good rivalware, and yes, I'm talking about Lego Rock Band. Playing them for the first time is as pivotal a hashtag gamer moment as swinging a Wii remote or having a shower. You remember your first time. For me, that Guitar Hero debut was at a youth club and I hit all the notes perfectly. I did not know that you had to strum along. Very humbling moment. Very humbling moment. And as easy a prospect as it may have been for the fine people over at Harmonix and Neversoft to just choose good songs, I do feel indebted to them for managing to select and assort them in such a way that despite not picking up a multicoloured tab guitar in about a decade, I have no trouble recalling certain title set lists. There are world tours created venues such as the ones dedicated to a specific artist like Tool and genres like the metal heavy Ozfest, Guitar Hero Aerosmith, which had... can't think of it. I can't remember anything. Or Legend of Rock's closing hard rock chapter, which culminates in a battle against none other than Lou Reed himself. Not only was the music good, but the impact of the peripherals used was the most immersive practical method ever, with only the launch of the Wii later that decade bettering it. There's an argument to be made that the 7th generation of gaming, the 360, the PS3, the V-Smile, V-Motion and the Wii benefited more when it came to Guitar Hero thanks to the advent of song DLC, but when it comes to thinking about the origins and the initial impact, Guitar Hero on the PS2 made plastic cool, something that hasn't happened since. Well, not until they made this Kirby amiibo, which I'd say is pretty cool. I'd actually even say it's cooler than Guitar Hero. Honestly, I'm starting to think about replacing this entire entry with this Kirby amiibo, so maybe we should just move on. Considering this is a video about the PS2, I should probably try and explain its impact, try and explain why it's one of, if not the best console of all time. And while I could do that, the answer is simply this. Thing was fucking weird. There was for sure competition when it came to what console offered the most oddities. The Dreamcast came dangerously close to taking the lead, but it's only natural that for a console as successful as the PS2, so many games would be made for it, and more than a few of them ended up being like, well, this. While some of the weirdest PS2 games would go on to live in infamy and or obscurity, one of those games would, with its unique concept and style, help to define a console, define a genre, just define pretty much everything. Whether this is your first time seeing Katamari Damacy footage or not, we're all in agreement that there isn't anything like this, right? It for sure had an impact on a whole generation of independent game developers, but the only thing that comes close to replicating its style and gameplay in the 15 plus years since its release is maybe Donut County, but even then that feels like a stretch. Of course, doing something that no one has ever done before doesn't automatically equate to it being good. Just ask the guy who had his cereal with water for the first time, see how he got on with that. But Katamari Damacy is really, really, really good. And the game owes as much to its music as it does its rolling a ball of whatever lies in your weight gameplay when it comes down to its quality. In fact, it's one of Katamari Damacy's best and most important features, ensuring that the game never veers into monotony. The soundtrack, put together by Yu Miyake alongside a whole host of other creative musicians, never stagnates. Even when a song like Lonely Rolling Star or The Moon and the Prince stay true to its Shibuya Kai roots, it's always thrown in elements and little details, reminiscent of the balls of random objects the Prince will create during his adventure. Pinpoint each piece is like looking out at the night sky. Each star stands out but comes together to create a beautiful constellation. Due to the nature of most video game music, i.e. it being in the background while you do something else, lyrics don't often come up as a point of praise, but that can be rectified when talking about Katamari's best song, its main theme, Katamari on the Rocks. Considering how vibrant and joyful it looks, it's no surprise that we get an array of wholesome lines about doing your best and feeling great. Simply put, the mood on here and throughout this soundtrack is euphoric and utterly infectious, as is the motif that will rear its charming head on other songs. Speaking of motif, Yu Miyake reportedly said that he created it as a response to complaints that modern day game music wasn't as memorable as game music from years gone by, which is a statement as ridiculous as Katamari Damacy is. And this game lets you roll up cows. Regardless, he and the other musicians did just that, made a 21 song long album that we, or at the very least I, will never forget. Man, this football thing sounds really cool. I wish it was real. We all know the microtransaction monolith monster that FIFA has become, but it cannot be understated the pull and the power that FIFA had on the PS2 user base, to the point that up until 2013 they were still making FIFA on the PS2. For the record, that is 7 years after the PS3 launched, and was also the same year that the PS4 launched, and they were still making PS2 games. I've got to be honest though, like growing up, it was PES, Pro Evolution Soccer, PES. I don't know why I'm saying it so weirdly. This was my team. This one that I played all the time because it just played better. It was more fun to play. But if there was one thing that would ultimately help me become a total heathen and swap teams, it was the FIFA soundtracks. I could so easily just say, I'm including FIFA in this video because I like the music, and just call it a day. And you know what? I think I will. Okay, legally I can't do that, so I guess it's worth rationalising FIFA's inclusion, which I'd say completes a curation trilogy we've explored in this video. Vice City was curation in order to achieve an aesthetic, Guitar Hero curated music in order to fulfill the music rise to fame, and general satisfaction that series made its name on. And FIFA was curation for the sole purpose of putting players onto their next favourite tune and establishing a cool guy attitude. Now, I don't know for a fact that the gang over at EA Sports made this their core aim, but it makes a whole lot of sense. PES was a fun football game, but FIFA was a cool one, and what better way to stake that claim than by being a proto-Spotify of sorts, providing some of the hottest tunes to players who may never have heard them before. As far as I know, FIFA hasn't contributed towards military tech and warfare, so unfortunately the comparison ends there. Okay, so that's the why, what's the how? Have you seen these lists? While the series has fluctuated in quality, in my opinion, that started when they stopped letting you slide tackle the keeper, but by God, has the music always been top notch. I'll have to make a separate video at some point deciding on the best tunes, but what I can say for sure is that I have FIFA to thank for putting me on some of the acts that changed my relationship with music, like Block Party, Franz Ferdinand, and, of course, the Veronicas. That last one's just a little bit ironic though. Okay, it's genuine. So for my penultimate entry, I wanted to go with a very important game, a game that tackles a lot of big themes such as camaraderie, the allure of evil, and battles both internally and externally, and so much more. It's also the debut entry in a series where Goofy fucking dies. To some extent, every entry in this video is fueled by nostalgia, but none more so than Kingdom Hearts, the series that meshed the worlds of Disney and Final Fantasy, which is a combo so ludicrous that it sounds like someone thought of it at random during an elevator pitch. Oh shit. Speaking of ludicrous, Yoko Shimomura and her discography. Chances are, if you've played a JRPG, you've heard her work, and I'll tell you what, if I started playing Kingdom Hearts to ogle the beautiful characters, I stayed to listen to her beautiful score. Right from the get-go, Dearly Beloved is simple but also satisfying, and has set the bar for menu themes insurmountably high for me. The same goes for Hikari, which was my first taste for a proper orchestra used in the game, and while I've heard it a lot since, only Super Mario Galaxy has come close to surpassing it, and if copyright hasn't corrupted this video's heart, then I have to mention the very song I used in this intro, Simple and Clean. What is there to say about this other than it's a sleeper agent wake up phrase for anyone that played this game growing up? It's used in the opening cinematic in both back then and to this day, it is nothing short of mesmerising. Bear in mind that that's just the first 3 songs on this soundtrack, and it does not falter at any point afterwards. Even if you have no attachment or nostalgia for Kingdom Hearts or these songs, it is hard, if not impossible, to deny how well composed every song on this soundtrack is. So, the music's good, but for me, the reason that Kingdom Hearts music helped to define the PS2 was that, look, the game borrowed heavily from Square Enix's flagship series. The aesthetic is more cartoony, but we still had a lot of the same big hair, big sword visual beats, which makes sense since characters from the Final Fantasy franchise makes an appearance. The real-time combat system was fresh to an extent, but still borrowed a lot from previous entries. The story, yeah, you know what? We're not going to touch that. But when it came to the music, it saw the heights of Final Fantasy VII and went, you know what? We can do that too. And when a game can do that, when it refuses to live in somebody's shadow, goes face to face, and not only meets it, like does what it set out to do, but actually surpasses it, that's just some defining shit right there. I mean, even the gummy ship levels slap. I repeat, the gummy ship levels. If you've played video games for even a little while, you'll know all too well about having your expectations set too high, especially when it comes to new consoles. Companies setting their aims so high that nothing could possibly reach it. I mean, just look at the 360, specifically its Kinect thingy, which promised that you could scan in real life objects and use them. We saw how that turned out. The PS2 could have very well faced the same fate, considering the adverts that were put out to hype it up at the time. Why should I even bother describing it? Let's just show you them.
Welcome to the third place.
Yep, that was most definitely a thing that aired on TV. Considering the Lynchian nightmare used to hype up the PS2, those who are lucky enough to get their hands on it wouldn't be silly to expect something more fitting of that mood and not ESPN International Track and Field. But less than a year after its release, the PS2 would ensure that it would avoid those accusations of being too big for its 128-bit boots, with one very special title. One of my earliest memories of playing the PS2 is Konami's magnum opus title, the follow-up to 1999's Silent Hill. Maybe the fact that I was 6 or 7 when playing it for the first time says more than enough about me, but don't go grassing my mum. It was a demo included in the official UK PS2 mag, one that I no doubt chose because I knew I shouldn't be playing it. 2 things stuck with me from playing that demo. Number 1, despite never facing any enemies, the dingy bathroom, the setting, it ensured that I chucked my demo disc away out of sheer fear and tangentially related. Number 2, the music alone just unsettled me like nothing had before. What makes Silent Hill 2 such a definitive title as both a game and a soundtrack is that, simply put, it does horror better than pretty much every game and movie beforehand. Don't get me wrong, there had been plenty of great horror music prior to Silent Hill 2's release in 2001, Halloween, Suspiria, and the close comparison to Akira Yamaoka's score, The Thing, are all among my favourite film soundtracks. But man, there really isn't anything that manages to scratch that pussy infected itch quite like Silent Hill 2. I consider myself a patient, forgiving, benevolent god, I mean man, but boy do I like it when pieces of media cut to the chase, and Silent Hill 2 is no different. The opener theme of Laura is, for a lack of a better word, brilliant. It feels like a battle of 2 moods, melancholic and triumphant, the 2 factions waging war but finding time to harmonise. That struggle could not be more emblematic of Silent Hill 2, so it's no surprise as to why it's the main theme of the game. Also, check out the Play a Video Game Symphony rendition of this. you will not regret it. Of course, as good as Theme of Laura is, it wouldn't exactly be the most fitting palette for the psychological horror ambience Silent Hill 2 is going for, and ambience is exactly what we get. Well, ambient, but you know, potato. All the ambient slices available on this OST are among some of the best I've heard from the genre, but if I had to highlight a favourite, how could I not pick A World of Madness? A cut I've heard more than enough times, but thanks to its steely, desolate textures and foreboding manner, it's not one I've grown tired of. Perfect video essay music right here. So I've got Theme of Laura and an array of ambient tracks, but I'd be remiss that if throughout all of my rambling I didn't bring up the closer, Promise. There isn't much for me to say about this song other than its ideal closer, similar to the song that started it all, but one that for me is stripped of all its triumphant qualities. It is melancholy incarnate, and I love it. I used to find it comical that people would make chilled out survival horror YouTube videos, considering Silent Hill 2 is this game, but having listened to this soundtrack repeatedly and loving it, if liking those type of videos makes you a weirdo, then
I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
Silent Hill 2's soundtrack is simply just some of the best music I've ever heard. It isn't just best video game music or best movie music, it is just flat out some of the best music I've ever heard, and that goes along with everything that I've covered in this video. Whether you want to make the argument like I did that the music defined the PS2, or you would be in the counterpoint and say that the PS2 defined the music, regardless, I think it's very clear to see that the PS2 and everything that came with it helped to define generations of people like myself. Hopefully that's a good thing. As always folks, stay safe, stay hydrated. Hello, thank you for watching this all the way through. I think that's very cool of you. Yeah, it's been months in the making. Hopefully it was as much fun to watch as it was for me to make. If you want to give this a like or subscribe, that'd be cool of you. Almost at 2k subs, which is mad. And if you want to support me further on my Patreon, for as little as £1 a month you get early access, that'd also be cool. But even if you can't, just thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you soon.